one of the reasons why I've chosen to use this over what I normally use, which is a folded unguarded razor, is because of the technique I'm using on the top here, which can be called a lot of different things, but I've heard it called splicing by my friends Michael Polsinelli and Shay Dempsey, who to me are two masters of this type of razor, who I've taken a lot of inspiration from. And you can see what happens here is I can work higher elevation, work over the fingers, and I'm using the short, this is an inch shorter than the regular styling razor. We have these on Hairbrain Pro, because I love the way it just fits right in my hand. And since I don't stick my finger in the hole, I don't need to be far away. And again, I'm just coming in with the corner. Now again, if this blade was unguarded, this wouldn't make a lot of sense to put, I don't push my thumb against it, but I just push the hair into it, and then I'm able to make this nice little jagged cut with the blade. Fun way to do short hair with the razor. I mean, again, there's many different ways to hold and use it, but this is just something that's good for this area here. You can see I'm using the triple clamp, so I have a lot of tension, and what that means is I've got 3 fingers holding the hair, and I'll explain that a little bit more, but tension is really important because I'm going to be moving and manipulating the hair, and I don't want it to pull as I cut. So you can see I've got 3 fingers there. I think that's a good shot, right, Cal? Normally we have 2, and these little guys might be floating off in the air. If I put the 3rd one underneath there, we call that the triple clamp, and it just gives you more control so that actually when you move the hair around, which you do a lot with razor cutting to get different angles, the ends of the hair don't change at all. They're actually locked in, and it's just the hair beneath your hand that's moving around.
Just want to take a minute and say hello to all of our friends watching. Sid Sutong is saying hello and looking good.
Hey Sid, good old friend of ours, known each other probably well over 20 years. He moved to England, created his own brand, and that's awesome. He's done some great stuff. It's always great to have you joining us. We need to get you on a live soon. Send me a message. I think it's been a while since we had you.
Sharon Sissy Boyd is saying hello. And welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out.
So I just, for simplicity of control, I'm just bringing everything straight up to the ceiling square. I don't think this look, when I'm done, is going to have very heavy corners, but just to get the shape in here in a very simple way, I think just bringing everything straight up square and then dealing with any excess weight in the corners makes a lot of sense. Right, I'm going to change positions. I'm going to stand on the opposite side. Triple clamp that. I can see a guide right there. And then I come in and I'm grabbing with the front couple of teeth of the razor and matching to the guide. I can remember seeing this technique in the past where it was done more with the blade flat. And I have to be honest, I never liked that. I just felt like it was pulling too much. And then when I saw, and it was, I think the first person I saw doing it was my friend Michael Polsinelli, and I was like, okay, now that makes sense. And I think being a student of the craft that's where this kind of things are super important. You're always looking, not judging. I never say, oh no, I'd never do that. But I remember seeing it, and I thought the effect was good, but I just felt, I could tell I was pulling on someone's hair a lot. And I think especially with razor cutting, you have to be careful. If it hurts that person, they're gonna not be into razor cutting. And talk to your clients about that. How does that feel? Is that pulling? And again, when I deal with the full blade like that, it's also kind of a lot blunter, which I don't want the scissor for that. I'd rather just use a scissor. I'm sorry, don't want the razor for that. I'd rather just use a scissor. Where here, it's much more, for me, organic. Just want to make sure I'm not building too much weight on my second side. And I'm not. Coming across in the cross check, it's pretty square. There's a little piece there, it might be coming from behind. I can come across on the cross check here. And I'm looking, and that looks pretty good. All things considered, I can pop in a few more little bits of texture. As I work down into the side, I'm just directing everything that reaches straight up to the ceiling. So we're getting a nice textured top here. Short enough to have movement and texture, but long enough that it's not going to be a total crop on the top. And we run out of hair right there. All right, I'm going to extend this into the back behind the crown before I go to the underneath. Now this is something pretty typical for me that over the years has served me well. When I do shorter hair, especially if it isn't extremely graduated I tend to do the top first and then work into the bottom. Because I think, you know, the top of a shorter haircut, again, unless it's extremely graduated from the bottom to the lengths on the top, then it's almost impossible to start on the top. But if the top is going to be layered and maybe the bottom graduated or the top layered and the bottom layered, I usually start on the top to get the length right for the texture and to get the shape and just the visual of it. All right, so I'm pivoting through the crown and again, continuing to bring my finger up square. So this will build extra length and kind of the most, shall we say, dangerous part for a short haircut, especially on men, where that crown can kind of stick up. I don't think this is going to be short enough that that was a major issue, but it's just always a safety valve. Bring all this hair up, just catch and peel, splicing right in. And this should match up with the squareness on the sides right here as I pivot around, and it does. Just trying to be conscious to use the fine teeth of the comb. If you're a lover of quality tools, you'll know the Bupro 107. Normally it's blue, and then it came out in white a few years ago. They finally, after all these years, have made a carbon version. So carbon is rigid. I love rigid combs for razor cutting. I don't like anything flimsy or anything that has a lot of give to it, because you know you're dealing with hair in a different way, and I've always found that carbon combs just give me better control when I'm razoring. I don't always use them when I work with the scissor, but I kind of have gotten used to that more rigid, stiff comb. It's made a big difference for me. Everything here available at hairbrain.pro. We have all the different feather razors. You know, normally you guys would see me working with a folding razor, which I know a lot. It's become more popular than ever. I'm so happy. I spent 20 years promoting this type of cutting hair. And this is what you'd normally see me cutting with. But I've chosen, and I've also branched out over the years, that there are certain things that this type of razor is really good for. And I also think, you know, a lot of people just feel more comfortable with it. And you can get many, many of the same effects. Now this splicing technique is especially good with this type of razor. Just marrying that crown into the sides here, and we're good. Okay. I got extra length here. I'm going to use that later in kind of a freehand way around there, but we want to come into the sides now and start to work on the shape here. I don't think I'm going to be using a splicing technique anymore here, because I'm going to do something a little bit more controlled and technical. I'm going to comb that out of the way, especially this recession area or recision area, because I want to be able to deal with that a little more later. I'm going to come in with diagonal back sections along the hairline. I'm going to bring this hair down and forward. If I don't feel like I have a good guideline, I can peel some of this hair off the top. You know, just visually to determine the lengths that I want it to be. I'm going to comb this down and forward. Now with a flatter blade, you know, now if you've done some razoring with me before or heard me teach or anything, I talk about using the blade in 3 different ways against the head. One is called edge cutting, where you're cutting T to your fingers, and I'll show you what that looks like in this section just for the interest. If I choose to cut this way, the blade is like at a T with my fingers. I get separation, but I don't get a lot of thinness or taper towards the ends. If I cut with the blade diagonal, I'm going to move around for you, Cal. Yeah. If I cut with the blade on a diagonal, which is like this, yeah. If I cut with the blade on a diagonal to my fingers, I start to get some taper and still some definition. We'll turn her around. And if I cut totally flat, which I've chosen to do here, this is the most taper, least definition. And for me, that's what I'm going for. I usually now, again, if the goal is to keep that hair long and shiny and lustrous, that's not what I'm into for that. I would never use flat cutting for that. But this is going to be short and really textured. And I want it to just really be aggressively textured. So you can see the blade's totally flat. Here we've got edge, and here we've got bias. Is that better, Cal? And again, I can re-show that if anyone is missing it or wants me to re-demonstrate. We always try to get the best angle we can for you. Just let us know. Flat. Flat to my finger. So here's my finger holding the hair. Blade is flat. We call that flat. We call that edge. We call that bias. Each one of those rotations gives a different texture to your lines. That's really what you need to know about it. And just working in on a diagonal. To get, again, lots of texture working from the length on the top down. I'll keep working across, diagonal back sections. Not much over direction here, just using the previous section as a guide. I want to be careful not to end up with too much weight in the center back. And naturally, the crown should become the longest part of this haircut. Just because of the way that the head curves, where you're standing, where your guide's coming from. So it's a great way to not make that major faux pas and cut the crown too short. Just pinching on the edges. There'll be more of this as we go on later. I don't want to get too caught up in it. Again, diagonal back sections. Sections are about a ½ an inch thick. You don't want them too thin, especially not when you're flat cutting like this. If you have a lot of very fine sections and you cut with the blade like this, the hair is just going to be formless. You know, you need a little bit less section thickness will make the hair, especially with flat cutting, you'll just shred all the hair. So ½ an inch is probably just about perfect for what I'm doing. Because you can see there's shape. Even though there's texture, there's shape. If there were a lot more sections, it would be hard to build a shape. Seems counterintuitive to many of the things we learn, but when we start to think about cutting texture and shape at the same time, you know, we have to kind of just develop our understanding. Again, by the time I'm here, just barely into the previous section. I don't want to be over directing strongly towards the back of the ear, or we'll have a very wedgy look. And I'm almost straight out at the bottom, especially. Maybe one more section, then I'll start on the second side. You know, the good thing in here is I'm getting in, as I like to say, shape and texture at the same time. So I know what my line is. I've got guides and references, but I'm doing it in a soft, sketchy way. Yeah, but if you can't cut a version of this shape clean, then you definitely don't want to do this, because you're just, you're not going to be in control. Okay, so you can see, preserved all this excess length here. I'm definitely not going to need all that, but I sectioned out the recision for just that point. Crown also a little extra heavy, but this is a good time for that, because that crown starts sticking out or being difficult to work with, and you're in trouble. So here is where I was taking out that little extra hair in the recision or recession, and I just comb it and put it in here. Now again, important to work damp with the hair. I don't want it soaking wet, and especially since I'm using the flat of the blade, it could pull if that hair wasn't damp. Looking at where that crown is falling, coming in. First section is always down and forward to also fill in for the weakness of the hairline. And the blade is flat. Section's about a ½ inch. Down and forward, not, you know, lifting more and more. The goal is by about the back of the ear. I have very little over direction. So the first 3 sections are lifted more and more progressively. Looking at the movement. This is the Samuel mannequin from our friends at Pivot Point. We have a great relationship with Pivot Point. They've provided us with great mannequins for all the education that we've done. Again, I am a huge believer in practicing the new techniques on a great quality mannequin. I know, and I've seen it literally thousands of times, it helps people get out of a rut. It gets you trying new things, building confidence, and what could be better. And then when you get your clients and your or you want to try it on a live model, you're confident and you're ready. Okay, working across. I don't want to take, that was a little too big, but right about here. Now by about this point, I'm really just combing slightly onto the previous, so I almost have to start to pull back as the head curves away from me. I don't want to be all the way over here. I want to pull like back from the root as you're combing, so you're almost on base. And to be honest, by the time I'm in the bottom, I am on base. So it's maybe a little more over-directed forward at the top slightly, but definitely less at the bottom.
I want to take a moment and say hello to Junior, our friend from the Aloha State. Good morning, and a happy Aloha.
Hello for all your support, buddy. A great friend of the hairbrain community. Again, just combing onto the previous, like the very top of the section might be directed a tiny bit more forward than the bottom. And as I move, I step into it or lean into it or turn the chair or turn the mannequin. This way Kelly can stay where she is. And I go more and more on base. It's a great way to graduate diagonal back sections. And here they start to crisscross into the opposite side. I've heard people calling it crisscross graduation, which is, that's fine. You know, I think that there's going to be a never-ending stream of new names for what we do as new generations get involved. And I think that's great. I don't think we're ever going to have one set language because every generation kind of redevelops things and relaunches them as their own. And I like that. I think, you know, what happens if you don't stay aware of what's happening, you start to get mad when you hear things like, oh, why are they calling it that? We just called that round graduation or diagonal back graduation, or we called it this, or we called it that. So I just crisscrossed the middle, which I think is exactly where that name's been coming from, and blended the two sides together. Doing just a little bit of work on the edge. I don't want to get sucked in too much because I'm still working on the shape. Oh, a little clip fell out, but that's okay. We don't need that at the moment. I want to make sure this is all blended through in the crown. So now I'm going to look to where that heavy corner is. Should be right here. I'm going to come back to splicing. I'll take some of that stuff at the top, that hair at the top, and check. And again, this is one of the reasons why I like using this razor for this technique, because it's possible to do. Now we'll come over here. Again, that corner was originally built just for safety, keeping extra weight in the crown, never a bad thing when you're going shorter. And you can always work up to exactly where you want it to be, slowly. Same here now. Now right here will be the corner. And again, we're going to break that down considerably. And I'll do the same in the temples. Building the corners. Quite honestly, because it just makes it easier to get the shape in. And then, you know, if you want to keep something very square, you don't need to take too much of the corner away if there's a reason for that. Or in this case, you can go into those corners a little bit more. That's what I was seeing there. That's definitely a little bit too much. There might be a little disconnection here from where the top was sectioned away from the bottom. So I'll check that on both sides. You can see a little disconnection there. Which I don't mind if there's a little separation, but I don't want like a big obvious piece of hair. So here again, looking at the corners. Corner here. Going right into that corner. Staying away from the front at the moment, but I will be coming to the corner in the front momentarily, and then we'll start doing some visual detailing, twisting and pinching. and cutting around the edges. Again, great to be able to cut overhand with the razor. It's a common question where people are, you know, this is a great way to do it with this blade. It can be done. Now this pinching, I definitely don't recommend you do with the feather plie, although anything's possible. I've seen people push themselves to do all kinds of things. Okay, so you can see how that little bit of refinement changed a lot. Now we're gonna come in here. I think before I take the corner off in the front, I'm gonna start doing my detail work. I wanna look at the way the hair is moving. And I wanna kind of just pre-section it out visually. Just to see which pieces, because I'm gonna do some pinching that hair together. And then I'm gonna again use the blade. I think I'll go in first and do some slicing into it. And then I'm gonna use the blade on each side of the section to start to bring this length down around the face in a nice textured way. So again, I find the hair that kind of wants to be together. I'm gonna do some slicing into it. That's just using the front corner of the blade. And then coming from either side, and kind of carving this down slowly into a little tapered point on both sides, trying to be consistent on both sides. In the corners here, I'm gonna bring this hair forward square as I do this to fill this corner in. Right, so if I bring this square, when I drop it down, it will arch down or angle down into the corner. So I do want to bring these forward. And bias blade on either side, a little bit at a time. And that should drop into the corner. Here, don't try to take too much. Try to take what wants to be together. Bring this strongly forward. And work it down from either side. Now watch as it drops down, how it fills in the corner. Probably the last bit, more or less, right here. And then look at what's actually on the hairline here. And you can see the edge. Okay, now working into the opposite side in the same way. Grab that hair, pinch it. A little bit of slicing. Come through. Now as I work out, I remember to think square. So it just means like from the wall behind me to the wall in front of me.
Oh, Christian is saying that he loves it. That's how he cuts the top, and he never understood why stylists cut the top with the razor palm to palm, especially with short hair.
Yeah, I mean, it can be uncomfortable to do that. I mean, with the straight razor, sometimes you have to, and then you can just lower the chair or move their head around. And I think that's perhaps why, or maybe they've just never seen it, or maybe they tried doing the whole flat of the blade, which I had tried, and I just was like, well, this is maybe a little bit too much. And then I didn't really do that for a long time either, so.
Nick Guinness is popping on and saying hello.
What's up, man?
Seeing how we're doing?
We're here, we're back in Cali. And now just kind of pinching and breaking these down. And try not to get too sucked in yet at this stage, because you don't know exactly how every edge is going to pan out, and you want to have some room to play. I'm going to do a little bit more weight removal in the crown by kind of slicing, holding the blade a little more like a pen now, and pen cutting, as my friends Shay and Michael call it. If you're interested in this type of razor, which I know most of you are, and perhaps more comfortable with, check out a class that we did with Shay Dempsey at hblive.me called Sebastian Creative Immersion. Sebastian, they're one of our supporters for many years, and they've always used this type of razor, and they've really developed a whole dynamic around it, and Shay teaches that in this course for haircuts. I mean, I learned a ton, and I've been razor cutting for over 20 years, but you can always learn something, and I did, so I have a feeling you will too. So now just, pinpointing. I still feel like for some reason it's a little bit heavier here, so I'll just come in. Good. I'm just going to put a little product in. I'm going to use something from one of our newest supporters, Intelligent Beauty, Intelligent Nutrients, a company that was founded by Horst Reckelbacher and is now being carried on by his family. Intelligent Nutrients, which is kind of progressed into what's being called Intelligent Beauty, and they make some great stuff. And this is their Tussle Texture Paste, matte paste, which I really love. Let me show that. Stand for a lot of great things, if that's important to you, which I know it is. A company is not only the ingredients, but the ethics, what they stand for, what they believe in, what they support. Check these guys out, you love them.
Sid is a fan. He's saying it's awesome.
Yeah, man, thank you. It's a compliment. Sid is, one of the most renowned. He kind of made himself that. He was just like me, a Sassoon educator, and he went off and became like a very renowned men's hair cutter. So I don't really cut a lot of men's hair, I'll be honest. Although I did start off as a barber. I don't know if Sid knows that. I still have a master barber's license. It was kind of easier to get at the time than the cosmetology license in New York. And I've kept it up all these years.
Right.
As a teenager, all I did was cut men's hair, and then I just never wanted to do it again.
Dominic Bartolo is saying nicely crafted. He loves it.
Thanks,
Thank
buddy.
you.
So all this now is little detail work, which to be honest, I can't get great without a mirror. It's like you can't see these little details when you're staring right at them, but I will do my best. So just pinching the edges. And now I would come in and really start to detail this. What sometimes happens with this stuff is it gets too set in place. So sometimes at this point I'll brush through just to disturb it a little bit, meaning I've pushed it too much into something that who knows if it wants to keep doing that or not. So I want to just see what it wants to do. On a mannequin, let's be honest, the best thing to do is kind of cut these down a little flatter. See if that hugs into the head more. Because, sometimes that can be hard to read there. So sometimes I'll come into the edges. Now, a lot of people are the same. They're very thick on the edges as you get down into the beard. So just using the blade to kind of push that down. I feel like there's a little extra thickness in here. Whenever I cut like a shape like this on a mannequin, I always think of Bruce Lee. I thought he always had like a great look. Like sometimes it was a little longer than this, sometimes a little shorter, but it was just a great little shape. Square shape with rounded corners. I don't know that his edges were ever, this free form. But I still think that's kind of an iconic shape. All right, I think that's it for today, guys. I could probably play with him a little bit more visually in the mirror, but I think that's about as far as it's going to go right here. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great weekend.